Hello and welcome to today's discussion. Today we'll be looking at the differences between the original Western liberalised model of economic growth, looking specifically at the USA, compared with emerging illiberalised economies, specifically concentrating on China.
What is China? Where is it?
China is situated in Asia. It's one of the most important economies in the world as it's so powerful and has experienced high levels of economic growth.
What is economic growth?
We measure economic growth by GDP, which indicates the standard of living of a nation, or per capita GDP, which measures all final goods and services produced within an economy per year, divided by the average population for the same year.
So which is better, USA or China?
Well, you've just opened up the key topic to this discussion.
So what are the differences between the USA and China?
The USA exercises the traditional values of private capitalism, in which private owners control the means of production to gain profit in a market economy. China has state capitalism, which means that the state owns or controls most of the means of production and other capital.
So in the USA, are tools, machinery and factories mainly privatized? Whereas in China, the states own them.
More or less, you're beginning to gain some understanding, but it's more complex than that.
Why?
Well, in the USA they have liberal democracy, which is based on individual rights and freedoms, which are practiced through a representative and fair voting system.
So, don't Chinese people have to vote?
Yes, they do vote, but they have a de-emphasised democratic system, with their voting system being based on a hierarchy. Therefore, citizens only vote for the first level of local governance. Then they vote for the level above them, and so this continues until the president is elected by a select few.
Oh, I see.
The USA has prioritised political rights, with each person having the power to vote and rights of citizenship. While in China they emphasise economic rights, such as access to resources, legal approbation and market exchange of goods and services.
So, is the USA's economy better?
In the past, the USA's values have been deemed as more important for economic growth. However, emerging economies, like China, have shown their values can also work to generate high levels of economic growth.
So, is the myth that the USA is better?
It can be seen as the Western illusion, which was the original system which developing countries were working towards. However, this can now be viewed as an illusion, with new models of growth being shown as also efficient.
Oh, crazy. Why did China suddenly grow so fast?
China grew due to several factors, particularly an increase in education and high investment in scientific research and technology. There were also health reforms in 1978, as shown by the increase in health spending on the graph and how it has risen alongside income per person. These factors are vital for achieving higher economic growth, stimulating a more educated and healthy workforce and a more efficient and competitive technological system. China's one-child policy, implemented in 1978, was partly in order to increase economic well-being and growth.
How did that work?
It was initially in order to reduce demand for natural resources, to balance the labour rate, and to reduce unemployment and exploitation. In comparison to the USA, we can see that technology within China has grown at a substantially higher rate. This is shown through the amount of personal computers, and how, with the increase in personal computers, it is positively correlated with an increase in income per person. These rises can be especially seen with the Human Development Index, which shows how life expectancy, education and income increase in order to calculate human development. The graph shows how human development has constantly increased at a higher rate per capita in China compared with the USA.
So, is China's economy now more important than the USA?
Currently, with the 2013 statistics, we can see that the USA generates 23% of the world's GDP, whereas China produces 17%. Also, the graph shows how China has no debt. However, the USA has reached $17 trillion worth of debt in 2013. China's growth is predicted to continue to increase, and by 2030 it's predicted to have overtaken the USA and produced 26% of the world's GDP, with the USA predicted to decrease to 16%. By 2060, the forecast shows China reaching 28% and the USA being at 17% of the world's GDP.
So, what should the USA do to remain globally influential?
It needs to decide between cooperation or competition. Competing would be the most logical because state capitalism is naturally the contrary of Western democracy.
But what should be the most advantageous for both nations?
Cooperating would mean giving the emerging markets the opportunity to figure out by themselves which political and economic system works best for them.
Wouldn't this mean the USA has to simply take a seat back and wait for what will happen?
Well, I'll put it to you very simply. If the USA wants to remain globally influential, it is a necessity to cooperate in order to compete. So competing would mean that the USA has to figure out how to maintain their market positions. If the Western countries would cooperate in the short term, they will have more possibilities to be competitive in the long term and can focus more aggressively on economic outcomes. This will help create a stable middle class that increases the government's accountability. This will help stabilise the economy in China as it continues to develop.
So, in an ideal world, they would cooperate in order to compete.
Exactly. We cannot expect all economies to adopt the same economic model in order to progress, due to the fact that countries are different and therefore what works best for the USA and where their priorities lie is different to China.
Oh, that's really helped me to understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.